This is a pretty good tier list overall. I don't agree with everything, but I explained the parts that I don't agree with. So yeah, this is the quote official tier list. You could it's not the exact opinions I have. Like you know, I already explained the parts that I disagree with, but it's not too far off from what I think. Hello everyone. So there's been like an official Melee tier list that came out recently. And basically, about 100 people were surveyed or so, or like 64 people filled it out. So let's just say 64 people were surveyed, basically, and gave their polls. I think I was one of those 64 people. The way it was done, it took all the rankings, and it pretty much took the average of them. So, like, for example, if not every single person put Bowser's last, so Bowser might be like 25.7 something, for example, instead of 26.0, because that, 26.0 would mean 100% of the people put him last. And basically, the top 5% and bottom 5% of a given character were removed from the equation, which I understand why they did it, is to like make it harder to rig, to get more bases on averages. But like, let's say somebody wanted Jigglypuff to be a lower placing, or Bowser to be a higher placing, they could just put Bowser in top tier, or Jigglypuff in bottom tier and stuff, just to like rig it. So they probably just did stuff like that to like remove variance like that. There's pros and cons to this. I would be interested in seeing a list with and without it, and stuff like that, but yeah, anonymous tier lists and stuff. So anyway, I'm going to talk about what the official tier list is, also showing the exact numbers and some of my thoughts about it. So this is the tier list right here. This is not too different from my tier list. We have Fox at first, then Marth, Puff, Falco. These are pretty much considered the top 4 in the game, and I'm going to talk more about this as the video goes on, with the exact numbers given as well. So yes, Fox basically best in the game. Pretty much standard. So let me actually show you with the numbers. This is with the actual numbers. So Fox this is actually more important. Fox is a ranking of a 1.68, which means most people put him as number 1. And then it's like Marth, Puff, and Falco. They're all like 2 point something, 3 point something. So it's pretty much still agreed that Fox is the best in the game. If you want my opinion, I think Fox is the best character in the game in 2 out of 3s by quite a bit, but in 3 out of 5s. He's still the best, but not by as much. So I'd say Fox is without question the best in 2 out of 3s, because he's really broken if you can just ban his worst stages. Which is also why you keep seeing Evo victories by Foxes. Either a solo Fox, or it was either a Hungry Box, or somebody who mained solo Fox, or somebody who used Fox in combination with another character. Like Armada used Peach Fox, Leffen used solo Fox, Mango actually won Evos with solo Fox, and then Hungry Box with Puff. So only Fox one Evo, basically, or or Fox Peach in Armada's case, or Solo Puff. But anyway, and part of that's Evo's 2 out of 3s, right? Evo has the 2 out of 3 sets, so when Fox can just ban Dreamland against the Floaty, and then ban FD against the Chain Grabber and stuff, like, he doesn't have anything bad, but he still has stuff that's really good for him. So on average, he's really good, like insanely good in 2 out of 3s. 3 out of 5s, he's still the best, but not by as much. I still think he's the best in the game in both environments, but not by as much in 3 out of 5s. He's still, so yeah, number 1 by a lot, or number 1 by a little, and it seems most people agree with that. I start to have disagreements around here. I still think Puff's 3rd, but interestingly enough, Marth is like by far worse than Fox, but by far better than Puff based on these numbers. Marth is the halfway point between Fox and Puff and Marth in these numbers. I do think some of that is actually recency bias, if you know. So one of my opinions, basically, Zane's been only tryharding in Ultimate. Zane has only been tryharding in Melee during the time period that people like myself, Hungrybox, and many others have been focused on Ultimate because of streaming YouTube and a bunch of other reasons. So Hungrybox, but on everybody who started to play Ultimate a lot, we got worse at Melee. So Hungrybox started to fall off, me, everybody else, So we got worse. Zane continued to only play Marth and only focus on being as good as he could with Marth. So Zane's showing his like maximum potential of what he can do as a player, also pushing the character. Hungrybox is basically taking it as lazy as possible in terms of the melee route because he's more focused on Ultimate. And honestly, I don't really blame him. I'm just saying that these are variables to consider. I don't blame him whatsoever for the decision. In fact, the decision is very logical when you look at the income he's making on the Twitch. But for the purpose of this discussion, it's important to understand these facts. So Puff is not being pushed. So a lot of people are like, oh, Puff fell off. I'm like, not really. Hungrybox has not been as good as he was in the past. And a lot of people who have actually played him in the past years and have also played him in recent times. For example, I talked to Albert, a Falco player who 2-0'd and 3-stocked Hungrybox recently. He told me that he was worse than Snowy and many other Puffs that he fought. He couldn't believe how easy it was. He didn't even feel good about the victory. I talked to Ben. Ben, a really good Sheik player, and he beat Hungrybox. And then a few days later, he lost to Michael 41 billion and stuff. And he was like, okay, well, Hungrybox isn't even the best Puff against Sheik. I'm like, I don't think people would be making these arguments if Hungrybox's main form of income and livelihood was that. Like, he literally he starts to just hold into people and start drifting at him. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning this is because I think it's part of people's opinions of the character. A lot of people use recency bias and stuff, and I think that's part of the variables here that they think, okay, well, Puff got worse, but it's really Hungrybox that got worse. Marth got better. I think it's just Zane that got better. I think Zane's just outplaying everybody by a lot, and in my opinion, Hungrybox is just a lot worse than he used to be. That's my honest opinion, and I've been around for like almost 2 decades now, just observing all the highs and lows of everybody, and playing the game and characters and stuff. So, this is just my honest opinion. So yeah. Mark says, this is why I start to have disagreements. I think there's recency bias in both. But I also want to mention that Puff, with or without a ledge grab limit, affects her a lot. I think she's anywhere between 3 or 4 if there's a ledge grab limit, and anywhere between 1 to 2. She's either Puff should either be first or second if there's no ledge grab limit, but there is one. And with, depending on the rule set of ledge grab limit, she's either 1-2 spot or the 3-4 spot, in my opinion. Because her planking and stalling, she can even stall in the air and stuff. There's a lot of ways she can do this. You saw it at like Hungrybox against Axe's Pikachu, Amsa's Yoshi, and many other players. When he really, really wanted to win, when he really needed to win before he was a big ultimate streamer. In the play-to-win environment. Imagine a melee tourney, but there's $1 million on the line for every set. Like, think about how people would play if they're playing to win under that environment. Then you can envision what the character's true potential is, not counting like social stigma and stuff. If they're just only playing for the win. So that's some of the factors there. I actually think this is the most surprising part, and I very strongly disagree with this part. This part puts Falco at 3.56, and I think Falco, if you watch my tier list, I think Falco is the second best character in the game. His ledge dash, for example, is only 1 frame worse than Fox's, but Falco's just won a double laser from ledge every time anyway. If you're counting net play, he's actually even better because his illusion is about 1.5 frames harder to edge guard. So even if you can edge guard him with a jab on the CRT, it's about 1.5 frames harder online, which means even if you would easily jab the recovery on a CRT, he can actually just almost every time get behind you. He'll almost always get behind the Marth trying to jab him, for example. This buffs lasers, changes power shield timings. You wouldn't know if you only watch Zane, but if you watch anyone else, it'll be obvious. It will change the out of shield timing when you block Shine and try to move out of shield, and most importantly, it will change illusion timing. This also buffs Fox, but it mainly just buffs Falco because Falco's was already, they were both very reactable. Fox was easy to react to, but Falco's was like, I think 3 frames faster or something. So something that was already borderline like difficult for humans anyway became 1.5 frames harder on average. That makes Falco even better online, but it depends, are you valuing online or offline in this scenario. And the online actually buffs Falco quite a bit. I don't think people talk about this enough, or they don't know. So I just wanted to mention that too. I personally think Falco is second best in the game, and I think people continue to underrate this character very, very massively. But that is my honest opinion. I've had this opinion for a long time. I still hold this opinion. So, Sheik, 5th, I actually agree with this. I think she's clearly better than all these characters, and I think she's clearly worse than all these characters. I view these as the top 4. I agree with them all being S tier. I don't agree with the order, but I do agree with them all being S tier. I think Sheik is like pretty much her own spot where she's worse than the top tiers, but she's better than the high. If you were to view A tier as high tier and this as top tier, which it's not really because I feel like these are hot. I feel like these characters are high tier too. So it's not really, you can't just separate top and high. It's kind of like 3 S, A, and B are more accurate in my opinion. But I believe that Sheik is like clearly 5th. And when you look at the numbers, it seems people agree with that, which I actually agree with this. I think she's clearly 5th. She's kind of evenish or beats Marth, but then she loses to Fox, loses to Puff, loses to Falco, loses to Ices, and then she beats all the other characters. But unfortunately, the matchups that she's worse on is the best characters in the game. But then having other good matchups, you can't be anything but 5th. Some people actually think Falcon could be better than Sheik. I don't agree with that. However, I could see the argument. I think the main reason Sheik's better than Falcon is because Sheik has a much easier time dealing with Falco, whereas Falco against Captain Falcon is a really, really bad matchup. Like, really bad. If Falco didn't exist in Melee, I could see Falcon being better than Sheik because Falcon's better against Puff, give or take around the same against Marth, around the same against Fox. Falcon's better against Ices, around the same against Peach. Sheik's better against Pikachu, and it's either the same or Falcon's better against Yoshi. I'd say Falcon's better against Yoshi, actually. I think me and Wizzy both agree on that. And they both destroy Samus and below and stuff. So I could see Captain Falcon being better than Sheik in a world where Falco didn't exist, but that's not the world. The world is Falco does exist, not to mention Falco's pretty common. And one of the best players, Mango, uses Falco, and then a whole bunch of other people use Falco. So the fact that Falco exists and is important makes Sheik better, in my opinion. Then you have Peach. I agree with Peach being 6. I think she's worse than Falcon, and I think she's carried by Armada. There's other good. No, she's still a really good character, but I just don't think she has more potential in these two. I think these characters have the speed to deal with more situations and have more top level potential. Peach, I think you can also get the lead against her and time her out depending on the character. It's risky with someone like Marth because she can just get death turnips. But if you're like Fox or someone, or Jigglypuff or someone, and you really just want to win, you can just play the whole lead type of game. A lot of characters can play a certain game where she doesn't have the speed to deal with it. It's just most people don't play like that or are not good at it. So yeah, 7th makes sense for me. Ices are considered much worse here. They're considered 8th, but it's considered much worse on the votes. I don't think the gap should be that big. In fact, I think it's debatable if Ices are... In my opinion, it's debatable if Ices or Peach are better. I think it's highly debatable. And I think this list is not Wobbling Man. This list is with Wobbling Legal, which is even more surprising. That I think Wobbling Legal, Ices might be better than Peach, actually. There's actually more top Wobbling Ices than there are top Peaches. It's just that Armada was so good at the game that people would think otherwise. But you can literally just see Armada use Fox and see how good he was at the game. I think Armada is just insane at the game. And Triff and the other top Peaches they're good too. But Armada was like Armada level. Like, you know, like not just Peach, but he could play a lot of characters at extremely top level. He was just real good. I think he carried Peach actually, in my opinion. I think Wobbling Ices should be higher than Peach, despite what this list says. However, with Wobbling Band, I think Ices are definitely worse than Peach. But I still think Ices are quite viable and good because they can still zero def you. It's just a lot. It's not as brain dead free and guaranteed. Now, Pikachu and Yoshi. This is the two closest placings on the list. Pikachu had 9.62 and Yoshi had 9.69. So they're basically at the same spot, but Yoshi's considered better. This is exactly what I did too. I think it's close between those two, but I think Pikachu's better. So I think this is... I actually agree with this. I think Pikachu, Yoshi, it's just like this. Pikachu's slightly better. I agree with this part. Samus. This is where this is another part where I have a big disagreement. At first, I was saying Falco's underrated, and now I'm going to say Samus is overrated. I think Samus does not deserve to be this close to Pikachu and Yoshi. I think Samus is overrated, camp really hard, and just beats foxes who want to nair in front of her or attack his shield. Characters like Sheik and Jigglypuff, for example, and Sheik, Jigglypuff, and Captain Falcon, for example, have extremely strong matchups against Samus, where it's to the point that I feel like just playing bad with those characters will still give you a big advantage. Whereas I just don't feel, after playing people like Axe, Amsa, and a ton of other top Samuses over the last 15 years or so, like almost 2 decades, I have quite a bit of experience against all these characters, and that my honest opinion is that these two characters have a lot more top level potential. I still think Samus is 11. I agree with Samus at 11, but I don't agree with it being this close. I think Samus should be closer to Luigi. In fact, to talk about that point, Plup actually had a conversation with me like a year ago, and he says he thinks Luigi might be better than Samus. So, Plup, you all know he's a top Samus, like top number 1 or 2 in Samus player. He's also probably a top 2 Luigi player. If you've ever watched his Samus and his Luigi, you know he's like top 2 with both characters. And Plup told me he thinks Luigi could be better than Samus. Has a high chance of being better than Samus. So for the sake of right now, I'd say Samus is better. However, even Plup, who's best of these characters, or top 2 of these characters, thinks Luigi could be better. So I don't think the gap should be more than 2 points. And right here it shows more than 2 points. So I just want to give that information to the community so that they understand that, hey, maybe Samus is being overrated, maybe Luigi is being underrated by comparison. Although I do think after these top 10, I think these are the clear top 10. I think these characters are clearly worse than the characters above. Now, Luigi, as I said, Samus, Luigi, very close, or at least in my mind they should be. So Samus, again. Falco, I think, should be higher. Samus, I think her points should be lower. Not the placing, but her points. And then Doc. Doc being close to Luigi, I actually agree with this. I think Doc is very underrated. Doc is much better than Mario. As you can see, I've talked to people like Mango and Nun, and Mango and Nun both told me they think Mario is better. I think they're crazy. But it's a good thing that most people don't think that, because look, 15.5, 12.6, that's like 2.9 points here. It seems most people agree with me now. Doc is better, and I don't even think it's close. Doc has a cape which goes below stage. He can edge guard anyone. Like if Marth does a perfect sweet spot, effortlessly hits that. Effortlessly edge guards anyone with the bear, with the cape. The back air gimps it like 0. The up throw fair or down throw fair kills really well. Crouch cancel down smash does 2 more damage and more knockback. A lot of these and pills are better than fireballs. All of these things are extremely common and extremely important, and make Mario significantly worse than Doc. So I agree with this. I agree with Doc being much better, and I think Doc is actually comparable to Luigi and Samus, in my opinion. Then you have Ganon. Ganon is between Mario. I actually think Ganon, Mario, and I think these 3 characters, Ganon, Mario, and Doc, I see these characters, these 3, which are in the C+, C+, C- tier. I think these 3 characters are about roughly equal. It's really hard. I don't even know how to rank Ganon, Mario, and Doc, DK, because I feel like it's highly debatable. like DK does worse in a lot of matchups, but then DK is so good against specifically Fox and comboing characters like Fox, Falco, even though he can't win neutral against Falco. Cat and Falcon, when he gets his hands on him, he can still like cargo up air characters. I think these characters should all be close. Right here you see a gap between Ganon and DK. I personally think these 3 characters could be placed in any order, but I think they should all have their own group where it's just these 3 characters alone, in my opinion. I think these 3 characters could be placed in any order. And I do agree with Doc having a big gap between Ganon, as you can see a 2-point difference here. I think this 3, despite the rankings here, could be highly debated. Then we have Young Link and Link, another gap here. Young Link and Link. This could go any order, and I think this is like a huge debate. Nobody can really agree who's better, Young Link or Link. I think it's highly debatable. It really depends. Like, okay, Young Link is better against like probably like floaty. Like Young Link is way better against Jigglypuff, better against floaties like Samus and Peach, can time out and stuff. Can really fight these floaty characters. But then you put him against the Fox, and Link looks better against Fox. And Link is bad against Fox, but Young Link feels even worse against Fox. So, but then you have like active players like Axe is going to give people recency bias on Young Link being good and whatnot. And you remember, oh well, at least Young Link has a place in the meta. Young Link can be used against Jigglypuff and stuff, even though only Armada's ever really done that successfully. Again, you can argue both ways. Link has a lot more better matchups, but Young Link is good in a lot of the important floaty matchups. I can agree if this being close. I don't really care who's ranked above who, so I can kind of agree with this. You have Game Watch here next. Game Watch can be good against... Game Watch can be considered kind of underrated. Or in the past considered underrated. There was a time people underrated Game Watch. You've had people like Forrest, Mr. Els, who was like 1 hit away from beating Hungrybox in a set. Although, honestly, it doesn't mean as much as it did in the past because, Hungrybox used to be better like a year or 2 ago. But still, not to discredit, but you have Game Watches. They're not beating Hungrybox, but they're getting close. They're doing respectable. And I've seen like Forrest go off on a lot of people when he was at his peak, his prime in Melee, when he's practicing stuff. I've seen him do really cool stuff. And Corb has done good stuff. And I've played Armada's Game Watch. Game Watch Puff low-key is like only 55-45 Puff favor at super top level, I think. Unless Puff goes for super timeout strats. But I guess that's Puff against most characters. But yeah, I can agree with this. But I do think that like having a really bad shield and no out of shield, like a really bad dodge, really bad roll, really bad out of shield, he relies a lot on like the crouch down smash or the spacing. And if a character like Fox or Falco just gets in his face, Game Watch doesn't really have out of shield, which is why I think Game Watch maybe can't be that high. But then again, all these characters from Young Link and below are kind of helpless. Like, I think all these characters kind of are bad. Like, really bad. These characters, DK, Mario, Ganon, and above, are kind of, like, viable. But then Mario's unviable because... Well, Mario is just pointless because Doc exists. And these characters and above can all be, like, good and stuff. I think these characters kind of fall off. And specifically, like, I think Young Link and Game Watch can fight Jigglypuff well. Specifically Jigglypuff. But that's, like, it's weird because Puff is good against all these top tiers, but then... Young Link and Game Watch can fight him well, but then all of the players who are the best at Melee and the most talented at Melee, they don't waste their quote, talent on like putting their hundreds, thousands of hours into Young Link or Game Watch just to have like a even-ish matchup against Puff. Although it could be a good play, it's like why would they do that when they could just learn Fox or a top tier or A or S or A or B tier and get more consistent results against the masses and get more reward off it. So the players who are the best at the game overall fundamentally, they don't put that kind of time into Young Link and Game Watch, except for people like Armada and stuff. Anyway, and here's another big gap: 17.95, 22.2. This is it's not a 3-point; it's a 2.3 gap. So more than 2 places here. People seem to think that these characters are clearly the worst. Now Mewtwo, I know Leffen says is underrated. I still think Mewtwo's pretty bad. I think Mewtwo's not very good. You can just jump. All he really has is like in neutral. He's really big on like down tilt and crouch cancel. But if you're like as good against Mewtwo as he is against you, you shouldn't be beating people who like are equally as good at the game. And then you have like I feel like if 2 people are equally skilled and know the matchup equally, Mewtwo just is gonna fall off. I feel like just like all low tiers, he can get away from more by people not being used to it. But Mewtwo is still considered better than Roy and Pichu. Now I used to think Pichu could be like 6th, but as thinking of the game more, I think Pichu has some better matchups. Like Pichu can fight some top tiers well. Like he can actually fight characters like Marth, okay. Cat and Falcon, okay. Sometimes out of shield against Falco, but not really. But Roy can actually fight the fast fallers, Fox, particularly Fox, but also Falco and Cat and Falcon decently. And the fact that he can fight the fast fallers is really important because those characters are really common. You see them, they're top and high tiers. So the fact that Roy can fight fast fallers even though Roy's matchup spread is actually like not very good, and he loses to characters like he probably loses to other low tiers, and he like loses badly to like he loses to Donkey Kong and all these other characters, but he can fight top tiers. He has a better competitive chance. So he has a more competitive chance on the top tiers. So it depends. Do you value like if there's a low tier tournament, Roy wouldn't even be that amazing. But Roy can fight the top tiers like Fox, Falco, and Falcon. So it's like, okay, well, which one? It depends which you value. This is where it becomes what do you value more? So if you value fighting top tiers, then Roy could be like around the Link level. Well, you could put Roy around Link and Young Link level just because he's so good against Fox. When I say good against Fox, I mean he still loses to Fox, but he's good compared to these other characters against Fox. He's better against Fox than any of these characters here, in my opinion. Mewtwo's the only one that's like debatable for that matchup particularly. Now Pichu can actually fight a lot of characters decently, but Pichu actually is so bad against Fox. I used to have more faith in Pichu, and then after I played the game more, I realized, okay, I'm actually just carrying this character. So this, you could say Leffen's carried, Mewtwo's carried by Leffen, Roy's carried by Zane, Pichu's carried by me, and then if you take me, Zane, and Leffen out of the equation, the characters kind of just don't do anything for the most part. But yeah, but then you could argue that for like any of these characters too. Now anyway, moving on, you have Ness next. Ness is considered not much worse than Pichu. I actually disagree. I actually think, while I do think Pichu's better than Ness, I actually think Pichu's much better than Ness. In my opinion, Pichu's quite a bit better than Ness. I might be biased because I use Pichu and I can feel the mobility options I have. I just don't really think Ness is very good, and I think Pichu's movement and just moving around the stage naring and having a good shield and a good roll and stuff, just that general movement, Pichu's movement and nair alone and shield and roll and all that are just better than Ness's entire character. I think Ness is actually, in fact, I think Ness might be worse than Zelda. I think it's really debatable. I think this order's fine, like Pichu, then Ness, then Zelda. I think this could be fine. But I could see Ness even being below Zelda, despite these numbers suggesting that Ness is the halfway point between the two. Which, you know, this is fine. This isn't far off from what I think. And then here, near the bottom, you have Kirby, who's, for some reason, not that much worse than Zelda. And then you have Bowser, for some reason, way worse than Kirby. I actually think it's not even obvious if Bowser or Kirby's worse. I still think, I agree that Bowser's the worst, but I can see an argument for Kirby being worse. Like, I think Bowser's the worst in the game, but it's not out of the question that Kirby could be worse. Yet these points seem to suggest that Bowser's definitely, like this is almost 26.0. The points seem to suggest that the community believes that Bowser's is clearly worse. I don't think it's as clear cut as that, in my opinion. And then Ness, I think even Ness Zelda is like way better than like Kirby Bowser. I think Kirby Bowser are the clear bottom two. And that's fine, because look, they're both F tier and stuff. So I agree with the vast majority of this list. Mainly, it's a few things like, I would switch Marth and Falco, but you all know, like, you're just going to be saying biased or whatever, but whatever. I've made videos on this in the past, so you can feel free to disagree. I think Peach Ices could switch if wobbling's legal, only. Otherwise, just keep it how it is. I think Samus should still be 11, but she should be much closer to Luigi than Yoshi. I think Yoshi is much better than Samus at top level. And you know, these three could be any order. You know, these two, any order for the most part. And this is not too far from what I think. So, all in all, this is a pretty good tier list overall. I don't agree with everything, but I explained the parts that I don't agree with. So yeah, this is the quote official tier list. You could it's not the exact opinions I have, like you know, I already explained the parts that I disagree with, but it's not too far off from what I think. So yeah, I've made my own tier list and stuff. My opinions do change over time, but they don't change significantly over time. Like my opinions might change like a little bit over time, but for the most part, you could see that it's not too different from what I think. And this is like the average of like 64 opinions, with the top 5% and bottom 5% of a certain opinion being removed from the equation. So yeah, there you have it. So this is my tier list video. And if this gets put on YouTube, don't forget to follow my channel and click subscribe and hit that bell icon. Thank you very much.